Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome everybody to our annual online Vernon user group meeting. Once again, we're excited to have over 100 people registering for this event, and we look forward to having you over the next 4 days. So first up today, I'm just going to talk about releases that we've made for Vernon CMS over the last year. The most significant change has been the release of the major version Egret, version 12.5 of Vernon CMS. So in last year's meeting, I gave a preview of this while it was in development, and the new version was released in April this year. One of the things that's part of that new version is release notes that are part of our online Vernon CMS help website. And every user within Vernon CMS will automatically be prompted that there is a new version when that upgrade has been applied at your site. So they'll have an automatic pop-up with a link to that live website where they can read in detail about the new features that are available in that version. I'll give a summary of the changes that have been made in 12.5. We've extended the person file within the system. So we've provided fields for adding in pronouns. We've made fields like gender allow multiple entries for people that want to record a history of that over time. And then we've added a sexuality and notes field. All of those fields are optional. Some sites may choose to use them and some may not. And it's also possible to block use of those fields through security if you choose that as an organization you're not going to be making use of them. We're finding more cases where people are creating interconnected person records, things like organizations linking to individuals. And so we've moved the work and relations window that used to be a separate page within Vernon to be just a tab on the main identification screen. And that's now provided easier access to that information. Lastly, we've created new symbolic or calculated fields in the object file to more easily get to biographical information about people as part of an object report. So a lot of these changes are ultimately driving projects that are outside of Vernon. There's a desire to record richer information about people and organizations that are connected to your collection. And the end result of that in some cases might be publishing that record on a Vernon Browser website. So this is an example page from University of Melbourne, one of our Vernon Browser implementations, and we can see some of that biographical information, ethnicity data getting published to that public website. I'll briefly swap to our demo system and we can see some examples of those. So this is our demo system running 12.5. I could do a search on the person screen. So let's look for Howard Morrison, a famous New Zealand singer. We can see that we find actually two different entries. There's a group record for the musical performing group that he was a part of, the Howard Morrison Quartet, and there's also an individual record. If I go to the second tab, we can see some of those new fields. So the ethnicity table has been extended over the last couple of versions of Vernon. We've now got options to record community keywords and language keywords. And because this is a table, one individual might have several different rows of information, as is the case with Howard Morrison. He was of both Irish descent and Te Arawa descent. And so those can now be recorded in the ethnicity column, which is a hierarchical field in Vernon, and in the variety of notes fields. That's of particular importance to Aboriginal artists, where there can be a complex set of information to record. There's many different language groups and language dialects, so you can go into as much detail as you need to within those fields. As I mentioned, the Work and Relations tab is now also directly on this window. And so we can see here the connection to that other person record that we saw before. So there's a related person record for Howard Morrison Quartet, who were a performing group, and we can record information like exactly what period Howard Morrison was part of that group, plus any associated notes. And then if I swap to my web browser, we can see the live site of University of Melbourne, where some of that information has then been made publicly accessible through their browser site. So information like skin name, language group, and country. In the case of University of Melbourne's records, that's coming from their ethnicity table. And then on their Vernon Browser site, they've relabeled some of those fields for the description that makes the most sense for describing that on the public website. And so we can see that Sydney Moody was part of the Kukacha language group, and we can see immediately the works that we've got available on this website that were made by him. As well as the person changes, the other major extension in version 12.5 is extensions to our XML import facility. We're finding increasingly sites are importing legacy data sets and new sets of information that they might have previously recorded elsewhere, such as Microsoft Excel, and they're needing ways to bulk import that into Vernon. And XML import is the way that you can do that. So there's a number of significant changes to this, particularly the ability to easily see on the bottom half of the screen the details of the record that the import is currently up to. That can be really important if there's problems in that data that Vernon needs to flag to you during that process. That means you can see all of the rest of the information for that record and see the problem field in the context of the rest of the information. There's also better tools for fixing this information as you go. So if Vernon finds that one of the pieces of information doesn't match the validation rules within the system, maybe it's an authority field where that term doesn't currently exist, you've now got clearer options for picking the correct term, perhaps applying that for all the rest of the import if the same problem is going to occur on later records, and for fixing things like dates that might be flagged as incorrect during that import process. We've also got a concept now called optional indexes. Indexes are like the index at the back of a book. It's taking the raw information in the collection records and making that in a format that's broken down at word level so that you can easily search on that information at a later date. However, there's a trade-off here, because the more indexes we add to Vernon, the longer it takes to save a record. So it's updating all of that information about the search indexes at the time you save the record, and it's not really technically feasible to index every single field in this way. And so what we've done recently is added a whole lot of optional indexes. So often they're very specific fields that might not apply to all different collection types. And there's now a system maintenance screen where you can turn on and off these optional indexes depending on whether they're relevant to your particular collection. There's also a range of sundry enhancements, such as simple shortcuts like in the date field. You can now type in Y for yesterday. Perhaps there was some kind of activity on a collection record, like a condition report was done yesterday. You can now just type in Y to grab yesterday's date. And so that augments the shortcode of T for today, which we already had. We've also added a couple of new date imprecision keywords. So in an imprecise date field where you might not know exactly the date that something happened, the system now supports from and to as additional keywords. There's also a range of sundry enhancements in that version, such as the ability to select multiple parts when you're putting objects into a packing unit, support for securing the connection between Vernon CMS and an external product like Vernon Browser, where we use the web messenger module to send information between those two systems, and also a new shortcut on the file menu, which we can see here on the left, where you can easily get back to the last record you were working on. So you might have just saved it and then you realize you need to do some more work. You can easily just use the hotkey Control-Shift-S to bring the last saved record back open on the screen that you're working on. One big hidden area of work that we do is security. So we're increasingly managing a range of different servers for our clients. We host Vernon CMS in the cloud on Windows servers now for a number of different clients. And we manage dozens of Vernon Browser servers and dozens of eHive sites. All of those we have to pay close attention to web security. That includes following internet security posts about security risks as they become known, investigating those issues to see how they affect the software and servers that we use, and if there is a possible effect, making sure we're applying patches, updating our software code in some cases. So a particularly recent version of that is an exploit that was called the libwebp exploit. It was a way of viewing and processing PDF images, and hackers found a way to exploit that particular image format to hack into people's computers. That's something where we then had to urgently apply patches to different parts of our ecosystem that could make use of those image file formats. We're also about to release the next minor version of Vernon. So that's just a minor release that's mostly bug updates, and that's 12.5.1. And so one of the key changes that's an enhancement in this is the ability to publish PDFs to Vernon Browser. So at the moment that's possible, but through a fairly long-winded manual process. The current process involves manually copying the PDF using a tool like FileZilla, and then manually recording a link to that online copy back in Vernon CMS. In 12.5.1, it's now possible to mark which PDF should be published. And so that's done through the external file field and through a category that you create to say which of your PDFs are public. So we can see in this particular example, there's one PDF, and I've created a category which I've called public PDF. As part of supporting that, we've built a new type of symbolic field so that you can set the logic that you want for selecting those PDFs. So there's a new user symbolic type that's called docpath, and it just lets you specify what field are you recording those PDF links to. So those are PDFs that are on your own internal Windows network, and then some other settings in terms of whether you're only supporting a specific file type and what category code, if you're using one, should filter those links to make sure you're not publishing private PDFs. The second part of that change is extending the web messenger module so that if you do have a particular public PDF on a record that's been changed, Vernon Browser can now automatically receive that PDF file through web messenger. So rather than manually copying the PDF to a website, it'll use the same kind of process we already use for images. It'll find the PDF on your internal network, package that up as a message, and send that live across to Vernon Browser. We also found a bug in XML import with the new code to check mandatory fields. There was a couple of special cases which it wasn't handling, and we've added in fixes in this release to cover that. We've also made it so that member records, when you're using group and member in the object file, now correctly sort by the accession number, which it wasn't doing before. And then lastly, there's about a dozen other minor bug fixes that are packaged up with that release. We've also been working in parallel on the Vernon Browser product. So the latest major version is version 6, and we've added a number of changes to version 6 since last year. One of the things we've done is just improve the product in general in terms of the volume that it can cope with. We've had some particularly big projects in the last year, the most notable being Auckland Museum, who have now got 1 million records in Vernon Browser and 250,000 person records. And so that's another scale ahead of the next biggest site. They've also got around 1 million images, so that's a huge volume of images for the product to cope with, and there's a few different places where we've extended it to support that. Many of our sites also use Google Analytics to get live visitor stats, so you can see what pages are being visited the most frequently, and different technical information about the visitors, where they're coming from, what kinds of web browser they're using, and so on. There's a new major version of Google Analytics, and we've upgraded Vernon Browser to support that. Some sites are also using Google Tag Manager. That's an extension where it can track visitors across different websites. So instead of them being on just one website domain name, Google sets up a tag where it can keep track of that person between a family of websites. So you get a more holistic view of how they're browsing the different sites that you're managing. Lastly, we've added in support for formatting image captions and formatting object fields using the Markdown language. So that's something we already supported in the past in the topic description field, but partly for a Queensland Museum project where they needed to format image captions, we've widened that support so you can use it in other fields as well. We've also extended the commenting facility to have clearer notes on the date a comment was posted. Before, we just had a date-time format, which was a little bit ugly. Now there's a nice clean format where it will say that this particular comment was added so many days ago or so many weeks ago. Many of our sites have public commenting available, and they're finding that they're gathering a huge amount of additional information about their collections through those public commenting features. The last major feature that we've added in the last year for Vernon Browser is a support for embedded maps within the object page. That can support a variety of different map fields for different kinds of collections. So in this particular example, I've got the place that a natural science specimen was collected from. But a photography collection, for instance, might have subject places where you want to mark on a map what particular place is depicted in a photograph. A social history collection, conversely, might have production places where you want to show where these different objects were made. Vernon Browser can support multiple parallel map locations, so you could have a mixture of collection types and we can still do an embedded map. And that map can also show more than one location. So for instance, if you were recording a subject place and a photographer's standing position, they could both be shown on the same map. It automatically shows the title of the object, and you can customize the heading label that's at the top of that. I'll just swap to my web browser and we'll see that working live in action. So here I'm currently on our public demonstration copy of Vernon Browser, browser.vernonsystems.com. We've got a natural science collection within that demo site, and that includes a number of different weeds that are found within New Zealand, invasive weeds, where we've got a small collection describing those. So let's search for weed, and we can pick one of those records. We can now see live on that record a working map page. Superficially, this is quite a simple change, but behind the scenes, this has been a huge amount of work for us. And that's because we're not using Google Maps. We're using a public open source product called OpenStreetMaps. And that's probably the biggest rival to Google Maps. The main problem with Google Maps is it's a paid service. If the number of visitors to a Google Maps page goes beyond a certain threshold, you start paying based on the number of views. That can be complex for a museum because there's an unknown operating cost there. You might suddenly get a project which is very popular and 1 million people come to that page, and then you incur a large bill because Google Maps is charging that visitor access back onto you. Instead, with OpenStreetMaps, we've set up our own server with the full global map data. And so that's our own service behind the scenes. In the medium term, we're planning to extend that so that we have a search results view on a map as well. And we'll be able to make use of those same OpenStreetMap servers in the background. One minor change we've made in version 6 of Vernon Browser is the support of something we've called a welcome message, a message that automatically pops up when somebody comes to your website. You can configure exactly the title and the contents of that message, and you can do complex formatting within that. You might have headings, styling, links to somewhere else, and you can also set whether that message comes every time a visitor goes back to your website, or whether they just have to click and agree on the message and then continue on. So we're seeing the need for this type of message in a few different projects. It might be that you've got standard terms and conditions which you'd like visitors to agree to before they start working on your online collection site. Or it might be that there's certain cultural warnings which you want to flag to people. We can see on the right-hand side, our demo site, a simple example of that welcome message. We've got some basic formatting there, and it's a responsive design. In other words, it'll dynamically present itself on the size of device that it's available on. So here's a tablet view of that welcome message. So firstly, we'll be continuing on with the 12.x series. So that's minor releases, which are primarily aimed at bug fixes, but there may be the opportunity to add small feature enhancements within that series. Another request which has come in, which would be relatively straightforward for us to add in, is support for the latest version of the EAD metadata standard. That's a standard used in the archives world, and there's a newer version of that standard available. So that's something where we could extend reporting to have that as another one of the XML output options. After the 12.x series, there's then the next major release. So that'll be version 13, which is codenamed Fantastic Fantail. And so that's a major release because the whole underlying technology, Open Insight, will be upgrading to the next major version. We're currently on version 9.4 of Open Insight, and we would be moving up to version 10. That's a 64-bit system rather than 32-bit system. So it means that it can use a larger amount of memory on the computer, and it will potentially run faster for some of the features within the system. It also gives us access to features that they've added into the development environment. So new tools that will allow us to enhance Vernon in ways that weren't possible in previous releases. So possible redesigns of the user interface, and then just looking for other improvements to the way that we display content within the system. So that's going to be the main focus of Vernon 13, and it may be that that's the entire upgrade, that the scope of adding in other features within that version may be fairly limited. The key focus is to get Open Insight 10 out there because that's a critical upgrade. However, there are other enhancements which we have scoped. And so although they may not make it into version 13, they're a high priority for us to do either at the end of that process or in the next major version. And so the first of those is revamping valuations. And there's a number of requests that have come at the last 2 different user group meetings that we've scoped out, and I can summarize them here. So adding in support for foreign currency as part of the valuation table. So being able to record the foreign currency country, the amount, and the exchange rate. For extending valuation so it supports decimal values. So although many of our clients just record whole dollar values, we are increasingly getting clients that need to record a precise dollars and cents value. And then lastly, better options for reporting on specific valuation periods, like the total valuation as at the end of last financial year. So that's something that's currently possible within the system, but it's fairly technical to set up, and you need a system supervisor to set those reporting date periods. We've also had a couple of minor changes requested as part of our support of library collections. And so that's the addition of 2 extra fields. a dedicated one for call number, which is currently only supported by adding that into the other ID table, and then adding in a simple publication series field. So rather than creating always an entirely new object record as a group for a series, in some cases it might be simpler just to have an authority term which notes the series and have a dedicated field for recording that publication series. We've also had some changes requested for support of natural history collections, and that includes the ability of recording multiple conservation statuses against a particular species or genus. So you might say that the brown kiwi, Apteryx australis, is endangered in one part of New Zealand, but it's not endangered on a specific island where it's now protected and that island is predator-free. So you may need to record multiple different conservation statuses against that one species. And then also there's a few sundry enhancements which we've also looked at. So the first of those is increasing the default thumbnail size within Vernon. At the moment, that's a 150 pixel square image, but screen resolutions are continually increasing. So it's starting to make sense to have a larger default thumbnail size within Vernon. So that's what we display in things like List Manager and on the object identification screen. We're also increasingly getting image links recorded within Vernon that are recorded as web links. So not Windows file paths where you've got a drive, a folder, and an image, but a web link that may actually go off to another internal system, like a digital asset management system. So improving the support of web links as a way of referencing media assets. And then lastly, we're getting requests in some cases to bulk delete records. There may be a whole collection which has been inadvertently imported into the system which you need to get rid of, or any other unusual cases where these records genuinely need to be wiped right out of the system. So we have developed a tool that can be run at the system monitor command line within Vernon that lets us bulk delete records, but we're looking at enhancing that so that that's something that a system supervisor could run more easily. Then within Vernon Browser, the key things that we're working on are the support of high resolution images. So having the ability to flag specific images where you want to publish a much higher resolution version of that, and then having tools to pan and zoom on those within the browser interface. So that's using the International Image Interoperability Framework, or IIIF for short. We've also been looking at extending support in Vernon Browser for other major files. So we have recently added topic, but we've also had requests for the event file, the site file, and the document file. So we have some clients where they have records which would be valuable for the public to access within those files. We've added in support for OpenStreetMaps on an individual object record to show where that particular item might have been collected from, or the subject if it's a photograph or a painting. But we want to extend that further so that we can have a map display as one of the results views. So you might search for a particular set of objects and then immediately see all of them plotted on a map if there is map information. And then also we've had requests for providing public users better access to download data. That's particularly important for researchers. So providing tools where on the results page, they can choose to download that content, if you allow them, as simple text file formats or as JSON, which is an international code standard for providing structured data. And that's what the example at the bottom of this page is. The same record has a JSON code view where we can see the structured field by field information, including breakdowns like earliest and latest dates for imprecise dates within the data record. We're also extending that PDF support further. So we've got the ability now to directly publish PDFs from Vernon CMS, but we're currently working on embedding a PDF viewer directly within the object page. And we're also working on text recognition within the file. So that only supports PDFs which actually have text in them, not PDFs which are just image scans, so we're not attempting to do OCR, so optical character recognition, just direct ingesting of text that's in PDFs and making that possible to search on directly within Vernon Browser. So if you had a text PDF document, you could potentially mark that you do want those documents indexed in Vernon Browser, and the public would be able to find the appropriate record in Vernon as part of that text search. One of the other large areas of work for us is ongoing data migration projects. Historically, that was primarily when people switched between systems. Kate McCorn in our office is dedicated to managing migration projects when people first implement Vernon CMS. But we're now seeing more cases where people already have the system and identify another data set which needs to be moved into the system. So two examples of that are Auckland Museum, where their documentary heritage collections are moving into Vernon for the first time, and the Art Gallery of New South Wales, where their archive collections are also moving into Vernon. Another example is we worked with the Museum of Transport and Technology in Auckland to migrate the National Library's subject thesaurus. So they've got Ngā Upoko Tukutuku, which is their Māori subject index. We've taken that index, which is nearly 6,000 different terms, and we can see the top level of that hierarchy on the right, and we've migrated that into a Vernon format. That's now available for purchase as an add-on. And so if you're interested in using that in your copy of Vernon, then get in touch with us. So there's a cost there because it was quite a significant project for us in terms of the days that we invested in migrating that data. And then hopefully over time, we'll recoup that cost if we have several different clients interested in that. I'll briefly swap to our demo system where we can see this new thesaurus in action. It's a thesaurus which you can copy into any collection field in Vernon, but the two most appropriate places would be the classification field or the subject category field. In our demo system, I've got it in subject category. So if I click on options, I've got a set of random English terms that I've got within the demo system, but we can also see the whole hierarchy here, as well as the Māori names for various different categories. We've also got a full set of English non-preferred terms. And so, as I said, there's nearly 6,000 terms. That's most practical to use by just typing directly into a field, often typing just the English term. So this particular catalogue record I'm working on is a greenstone slab. Pounamu is the Māori term. And so I could type in greenstone into my subject category. And that's just an example of some of the different categories that are then being offered to me. So those are a set of grey non-preferred terms, and I could click on any of those to see what the preferred name would be. And so there we can see that greenstone is the equivalent of Pounamu. We continue to gain new clients, which is always good to see. And two particular countries where we've had success in the last year are South Africa, where Aziko, which is a whole consortium of national museums in Cape Town, has selected Vernon CMS, and we're currently migrating data from multiple legacy systems. And then also the Thabo Mbeki Presidential Library, a reference library collection with thousands and thousands of books and related authors, illustrators, editors. We've also got a commercial corporation that has an extensive art collection that has chosen Vernon to manage that art collection. And then within Australia, we've got the Shrine of Remembrance, which is based in Melbourne. We've got Nillumbik Shire, a city council-based collection. And then we've also got Queensland Parliamentary Services, who have a range of mostly art and social history objects that are on display in the offices of Parliament in Queensland. As well as our development work, there's always ongoing work helping people get their collections online. I'm just going to show a few examples of sites that we've worked on in the last 12 months. So sites that have been upgraded or newly launched in the last year include Egret Brewster Art Gallery. in New Plymouth, New Zealand, Nelson Provincial Museum, who've had a major upgrade, and Heritage New Zealand. We've then also had Queensland Museum have been revamping their site that's used to contribute records to Atlas of Living Australia. University of Melbourne have been building a private intranet site for access to medical specimens for their medical faculty students. Tamworth Regional Gallery and Maitland City Council have both got new implementations of Vernon Browser. And in the US, two major art galleries, Farnsworth Art Museum and Figge Art Museum, have both implemented Vernon Browser. I'll just show you a couple of interesting features within some of those sites. Heritage New Zealand is a site that manages many different properties within the country. And so one thing they've done is focus on the different properties that are available to browse on their online collection within Vernon Browser. So each of these tiles represents a historic property and provides a shortcut for me to get to just the objects that are available online for that particular collection. Those featured collections can therefore be tailored significantly for each of the different sites, depending on what broad subsets they have that they want to highlight. Yvette Brewster Art Gallery is a site that's chosen to use the programming interface that's available for Vernon Browser. So as well as the default public user interface that the product has, it also has a programming interface which third-party developers can build upon. So this is a single integrated site where things like visitor access, what's on, information about their in-house cinema, and browsing the online collection is all within one single product. And so that's been achieved by using the Vernon Browser programming interface to pass through searches on the collection and automatically pull that information into the templates and layout that they've designed. That sometimes means sacrificing some of the bells and whistles that are available within Vernon Browser, but then you gain the ability of creating a single integrated site. Nelson Museum site has been upgraded and is now one of the largest sites that we have on Vernon Browser. If I click on the search button and just search for all of the records that are online, I can see they've got nearly 200,000 records available. I could click into one of those records. And one of the things that they've been extensively making use of is the comments facility. So in version 6, we've upgraded that, so there's full comments moderation. Let's click on a random record where there's been a comment added recently. And so this is a record where probably the original record just described it as a black and white photo, or maybe it had the person's name on the back, but somebody in the public domain has managed to see this photo and has added a whole lot of extra contextual information about it. And that's the beauty of enabling public comments. There's only a certain amount of information that you're ever going to know internally about the collection, but by allowing the public to give feedback on those, you can gain a whole lot of new knowledge about your collection items. So in version 6, you can set those comments to automatically go into an admin section waiting for moderation. So that gives you full control over spam and over the quality of those comments. And then you can choose to reply either in private directly to the commenter or on public. Lastly, the Maitland City Council site has also been upgraded to support oral history records. So they've been uploading recordings of their oral history items and putting those on SoundCloud. That's a popular platform for uploading audio files and making them easily accessible. So if I click into one of these records, so this is an interview with one particular local historian. And so for that project, we've automatically embedded the SoundCloud audio file player whenever there's an audio file link on that collection item. That particular link is just stored on the object record in Vernon as part of the external file field. And then we're automatically pulling in SoundCloud's audio player, which they've pre-built for us. And so then on any of those records, I can click on a file.
Oh, can you just tell me when you were born, where you were born, and if just where?
So that's an extensive oral history project where local historians have been interviewing significant members of the community. So that gives you an overview of different things that we've worked on over the last year. At the moment, we have around a dozen online collection projects in progress. So that's work that's always ongoing, and every month there's new sites that launch. So we highlight those in our quarterly newsletter, and so you can see those projects as they get completed. We can also do minor changes to existing online sites easily. So part of your annual support agreement includes a budget of 4 hours a year for minor customization. So if you already have Vernon Browser, there's an ongoing budget there for us to make small changes. That might be swapping out an image on the home page, might be adding an extra featured collection. It could be assisting you with you publishing 1 or 2 extra fields to the site. So just get in touch with us if you ever have any of those small changes that you want to make to a site that's already live. So thank you very much for attending.